Hi, and welcome to Belated Binge Harry Potter, the re-binge podcast that doesn't take itself or the books too seriously. My name's Zach, and I am your host. I'm the guy that didn't read these books till he was in his mid-20s, and now they became his, if not the, one of the most favorite forms of entertainment, and started talking about it on a podcast. We're going to do something a little bit different with this episode. As I've stated on a previous one, we're going to go topics here for a little bit, and I'm going to go back in kind of the Wayback Machine to when I was first starting this podcast and discuss a couple of the topic ideas that I had that I shared with patrons all the way back then. And I'm going to give kind of my own off-the-cuff revisit to those theories that I had shared. And they have to do with Dumbledore, the night of the Voldemort attack on the Potters, and the magic that Newt was using. Sorry, it took me a second to remember his name. That Newt was using in Fantastic Beasts Crimes of Grindelwald, and it has to do with Grindelwald. So I know that was kind of a clunky intro, but if it piqued your interest in any way at all, stick around and we'll get started on it.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Before we get started, this podcast will have spoilers. This series wrapped up in 2007. Just saying that out loud sometimes makes me feel kind of old. If you haven't read them by now, you're even later than I was. Shout out to the Bonus Binge Squad, Alex and Katie over on Patreon. If you would like to get your own shout outs, if you'd like to have access to bonus episodes, kind of like the ones that I'm going to be referencing in this episode, you can check those out. There's a link in the show notes for Patreon. It is patreon.com/belatedbinge. If you are watching on YouTube, thank you. I hope you're enjoying the videos that I've been posting on there recently, where I make fun of the process that must have gone in to been used, I guess you could say, to make the changes that the movies made from the books. It's been a lot of fun putting those videos together. I hope that it's been enjoyable for you. If you have no idea what I'm talking about and you haven't seen any of those videos, one, get on social media and actually follow this podcast, because I've been posting all of them as reels or shorts or TikToks or whatever, all the vertical stuff that they say to do. And also I've been posting a lot of times longer versions of those fake discussions on YouTube, and you can check those out too. There's a special playlist for them. That's all I'm going to do as far as self-promotion goes on this. I am going off the cuff on this one, as I did in the last episode. So apologies ahead of time for ums and stammers and all of that nonsense. But I intended to do a certain thing when I sat down in this chair. I got my laptop all loaded up. I got my face staring at me. I got the glare from the ring light on my glasses. I got everything going on, including the air conditioner that I'm trying to drown out with the soundproofing over here and the green screen back here. I'm like tucked in this corner. I'm in my basement and it's very, very hot where I live. So the AC is just going to be running, and that just is what it is at this point. Sorry if there's a teeny tiny little hum. Hopefully it'll go away soon, but it is like 93% humidity today, so it may not stop ever. It's just going to keep running. Can't wait for that bill. Anyways, adulting. So basically, here's what happened. My daughter, who does not take naps like ever anymore and is just a wild machine when it comes to fighting naps just crashed unexpectedly into a nap, and I was going to come down here and bust out an episode for you real quick. And I had this other idea. Long story short, when I sat down and I started to do that idea, it all crashed and burned, and it did not work out the way that I intended for this episode. So now I'm going with a completely different idea. And what I've done is I've pulled out my phone, I've opened up the Patreon app on my phone, and I've scrolled all the way to the bottom. I'm talking back to January 4th of 2022, where I posted 3 episodes on Patreon. I posted The Head Wizard on the Cobble Street, which was the opening chapter, chapter 1 of Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone, of the chapter review, podcast, literally the opening chapter of this podcast in its existence. And I also posted 2 bonus theories as well on that day. One was called All the Hookah Smoke, and one was called How Did He Know? And I just wanted to talk a little bit about those theories because I remember them, and I don't have notes pulled up on these or anything. I'm just, like I said, I kind of thought it would be fun to do a little topic going back to those theories. What I won't remember exactly what I said on those episodes back in January of 2022, but if you're a patron and you haven't gone all the way back that far, go ahead and go in the Wayback Machine and see how much of this stands up. And if you're new and you want to know what the heck I'm talking about, like I said, it's on Patreon. But there may even be a way to kind of tie these two together a little bit. We'll see. But here's what I thought I would do. I thought I would revisit those theories that I had back then and just talk through my thoughts on them as it stands right now. And so all the hookah smoke was a theory that I had. It was in regards to and this was coming off the heels of Crimes of Grindelwald coming out, the movie. You remember that movie? Like probably 6 of you at this point, because those movies were canceled due in large part to that movie being an absolute mess. But what I was talking about in that was the hookah. I guess you could say the hookah. Do you remember the hookah? It was like a really important object, I think, to Grindelwald for like 3 scenes in that movie, and we never saw it again because then he started seeing the future in the baby deer's blood. But this hookah was the way that Grindelwald was seeing the inevitable future that was to come, and he was talking about another world war and all kinds of stuff. It had Jacob really freaked out, and it seemed like that object was going to play kind of a big role in this series. And what jumped into my head was this theory that I had of how that object came to be. And so on that bonus episode, what I remember doing is laying kind of the groundwork of the relationship between Dumbledore and Grindelwald a little bit. Everybody that's listening to this knows this backstory pretty well. I've probably made my thoughts and feelings on the backstory pretty well known as well. But I will give you the 10-second version of it here that's going to go way longer than 10 seconds because I ramble, which is why I have a podcast, and this is my podcast. So rambling is welcome, I decided. So my 2 cents on that relationship is that, one, without going too deep, I think that the movie of the third movie, Secrets of Dumbledore, was kind of a bit of a retcon about their relationship. I think that they went way further into this was mutual love scenario than what I think was likely, at least as the way that I interpreted that relationship from the original source material of the books, as well as the comments that came out by the author later saying that Dumbledore was gay, and that that was part of that relationship. The thing that was said that always stuck with me and I thought made a lot of sense is that Grindelwald never actually felt the feelings toward Dumbledore that Dumbledore felt towards Grindelwald. He used those feelings to manipulate Dumbledore in order to kind of get him to, I don't want to say go along, because I don't think that Dumbledore was just flat out going along with Grindelwald and he's like absolved of all the Deathly Hallows and their plans, and how they're going to bring wizards out of hiding and all that stuff. I don't think that Dumbledore was an innocent bystander, just like blinded by love and a total follower on that. However, I do think that there were probably aspects of it that did not sit well with Dumbledore, but he made I guess like made the word that keeps coming to mind is concessions, which might be the proper use of it. I don't know. Somebody call an English teacher, but that's what I'm going with. I think he probably let things go a little bit further in certain ways that he wasn't comfortable with, but because he was so into Grindelwald, in their budding relationship that they have. And I say budding relationship because the thing lasted like it was like a month or like 2 months. I can't remember the direct quote, but it was literally like, I, for sake of extending it, it was 2 months that these two were together. And that's why I think that the Secrets of Dumbledore movie was taking it, I think, a little bit too far, of like the impact. However many, like 50 years later or whatever it was, by the time that movie was going on, if they were really like, if it was like a 2 month fling, then these two were not so desperately deeply in love with each other to have what we saw play out in Secrets of Dumbledore, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. You probably have a different one, and that's fine. Start a podcast and tell us all about it. I didn't buy I didn't buy that part. But what I do buy is that they had a very intense relationship during those 2 months, and that's where this all the hookah smoke theory takes place. See how we come all the way around there in a lot more than 10 seconds? But here was the theory in a nutshell. So Dumbledore and Grindelwald were plotting their their path or their quest for the Deathly Hallows, and the intention upon uniting the Deathly Hallows was that they would become all-powerful masters of death, and they were going to bring the wizards out of hiding to become the I guess a dominant force over the Muggles, or the ruling force over the Muggles, however you want to look at that. They were also 16 and 17 years old, respectively, which makes them children in our minds. One of them just above the legal age. He could probably, I'd say, buy a pack of smokes, but like, that's not really the thing anymore. Could he get a vape? I don't know. Anyways, the theory was that one of the things that we know about Grindelwald in his backstory is that Grindelwald is actually a seer, meaning he can see things that happen in the future. And that's why, supposedly why Secrets of Dumbledore was so confusing, because they were trying to confuse him with multiple different futures, I guess. But the theory of all the hookah smoke was that if we remember the only other seer that we see, how many times can I say see in the same sentence, is Trelawney from the book series. And if you don't count Jax Teller with hooves, aka Ferenzi, aka Ferenz, aka that one time that he was there in the classroom talking about teaching divination and how humans are so small-minded and all of that. Centaurs are bigger picture. So I'm not counting him because we see that they see in different ways than we would see if we were seers and had seeing ability. At this point, I'm just being being silly. So centaurs read the stars and the planets, and it's a bit more long term. What we saw from Trelawney is that she falls into a complete trance and starts just word vomiting the things that are coming in the future, the prophecies, if you will. I will, because that's what they call them in the book series. The thing about it is she has no idea that she's done it. And so if we take that as our source of truth, as our explanation for how premonition works in this wizarding world, Grindelwald might have the ability to see the future, but he doesn't know what he saw when he's done seeing it. Perhaps. And that's what the theory was built upon. My theory was that the Dumbledore Grindelwald duo thought that his ability to see the future would be a highly useful gift and skill when it came to their goals and path towards becoming masters of death and taking over the world, basically taking over the world. So what Dumbledore did is take his uncanny ability to make very powerful, unique, one-of-a-kind magical objects and put that into motion here. Because if you recall, we also have a precedent for Dumbledore being that kind of inventor with the Deluminator, which not only turns on and turns off lights, but it also apparently is a huge plot convenience in shape of a lighter. It's fantastic. I'm going to try to make sure that that's the last of my smoking references on this episode. So my theory was that Dumbledore actually created the hookah object that Grindelwald was using in the Crimes of Grindelwald movie to show and project his visions of the future, not only for like the crowd when he was doing it in that way. I think that was a development of his use of that object over many years. I think its original intention was just to record the premonition so that not only they had a record of it outside of Dumbledore's memory, which yes, could also be potentially done, I guess, conceivable in a pensieve with Dumbledore's memory. However, when you pull a memory out of your head and put it in the pen, it's gone. It's out of your head. I think the two of them would have wanted Dumbledore to very much keep it in his head, but also have a record of that premonition happening so that Grindelwald could see it and the two of them could see it together and analyze it and strategize around it. At least that was their intention with it. And so Dumbledore helped, or just solely did, create the hookah object that Grindelwald used to see the future. I guess in a nutshell, I don't think that he was using that object to see the future. I think that he had seen the future and he was using the object to record it and project it so that he could watch what he had seen. And by, the time that the movie is taking place, he had developed the ability to essentially project it so that other people could see it as well. So that was my theory on all the hookah smoke way back when. And I thought it was kind of neat and kind of cool, and it ended up being absolutely meaningless because that object didn't ever come into play again. I think Lita, I don't know if she actually destroyed it. I know she tried when she was killed because she was meaningless to the movies as well. So we didn't need her. So that was cool. See my bonus episode for how to fix the Fantastic Beasts franchise for some of those thoughts. I won't go down that road anymore. But yeah, let me know what you think about that particular theory. I thought it was interesting. And I had fun with it. I thought there might be a way to tie it into this next one. I haven't really wrapped my head around how to do that yet. But this next theory that I had shared on that same day was called How Did He Know? And what this was is actually a theory, again, on Dumbledore, but it was going back to the blood magic that of Lily's sacrifice for Harry. And basically what we know is that Lily sacrificed herself for Harry right in front of his eyes, yet he still wasn't able to see the Thestrals when he showed up to Hogwarts. You won't ever convince me that he shouldn't have. And I actually just recorded an episode over on a fellow podcaster's podcast about that particular topic. I don't think that it has released yet, but as soon as it does, I will let you know. That was the Dusty Cauldron podcast that I went on. That's the second time I've been on over there, and it was a great time. We had fun talking about Thestrals and how Harry should have seen him the whole time. And we agreed on that, which I was surprised. I thought maybe I was going to have to argue that point, but I didn't. We just got to talk, but we really did get to nerd out about it, and that was pretty cool. So check that out as soon as it drops on Dusty Cauldron. So, anyways, Lily sacrificed herself in front of Harry. That was what allowed for the blood magic to keep Harry protected from Voldemort for like the rest of his life, essentially. And was a big, kind of huge thing for the plot of the books. Obviously, we all know this. But the thing that I am honing in on here a little bit is that it didn't just happen. She didn't just throw her arms out, take the killing curse, and then some like magic dust go up into the air and fall over Harry's body. That's not what happened. I mean, to a certain extent it did. It happened in that moment where that sacrifice protected him, but then it's also like in that first chapter of the entire series that Dumbledore had to actually place a charm over the Dursleys' house on Privet Drive. And so my theory with that, in what I talked about in this bonus theory that I did, is that that charm essentially doesn't have a it essentially has a shelf life. I theorized that it worked like in that moment, but it wasn't going to last. But Dumbledore, knowing how it went down and being, one of the founders of uses of dragon's blood and stuff like that, he understands blood magic and ancient magic to a degree that most magical people don't in this world. And so I think that he recognized the opportunity and knew of a way to elongate that and make that a lasting protection as opposed to just in that moment over the baby. And so I think that's what those charms were about on like the Dursley's house. And I think that it was kind of I think that was a big part of, like I said, the thing that's kind of hovering over this entire series. But what I was wondering about in that theory episode was, how did he know? I know that I literally said that that's what the name of the theory is, but like, how did Dumbledore know? How did Dumbledore know how Lily died? I mean, he could have guessed. James is dead. Lily's dead. Harry's not dead. Voldemort's gone. not dead, but like, and like the rumors had already spread within a day that the Potters were dead and Harry survived and Voldemort's gone. How? How does anybody know? How does that rumor happen? It's a infant child in a crib alone with dead parents and like a half exploded house. How does anybody know what happened and what went down? How? Somebody tell me how. Well, nobody can really tell you how because it's not stated in the canon exactly how that went down. So I made a theory and I thought about it and I started talking about it. And here's what I came up with. I remember suggesting in the theory episode. I don't know how much of this I still subscribe to, but I like the way that it came through. So I think that, and I'll just say this is the part of the theory that was more just kind of like fun to throw out there as like an explanation of how it happened so quickly or whatever. But this is the part that I could be, you know, this is the flimsiest part of the theory, is that I know Peter Pettigrew was the secret keeper for the Potters. However, we know that Dumbledore is kind of like the master of the Fidelius charm, right? Like that it's kind of his thing. And I don't think that Dumbledore would have just stood by and allowed the Potters to be protected by a Fidelius charm that he wasn't involved with. So what I theorized is that while they named Peter the secret keeper, Dumbledore actually placed the Fidelius charm over their home. And so what I theorized in that is that there was a little bit of a pick your home security company to sponsor this episode, and I'll insert their name here. That's a joke. Nobody's sponsoring this podcast. But the idea was that once that Fidelius charm had been broken, Dumbledore was alerted in some way because he placed it. So there was something about it that allowed him to know that it had been broken. And so he was able to actually apparate to the scene immediately, or essentially immediately after the events took place in the Potter's home. And what I believed that he did from there is what I believe I refer to as the ESPN instant replay magic. And so let me to see what happened, and let me tie that thread here real quick. So we see in Fantastic Beasts: Crimes of Grindelwald, again, both of these theories, that this was around that time that I watched that movie, that I was recording these episodes back for Patreon. So I was these were a little bit fresh in my head as I was reading the first chapter of the Harry Potter series and really thinking about Dumbledore. So it all kind of fell out of me. So we see in Crimes of Grindelwald Newt using that weird like ESPN instant replay magic when he's trying to follow Tina, and they're in where were they? Was it when they were in Paris? I think. But he's like listening to the ground or whatever, and he like and like blows the dirt all up in the air, and then it literally replays what took place for him. He literally got to watch the scene of Tina like walking through that area. It's like it was kind of a cool concept for magic. And at that time, I theorized that it wasn't the first time we'd seen it. It was the first time we'd seen it in that way, but it wasn't the first time we'd seen it. The first time we have seen it is when Harry and Dumbledore go to Voldemort's cave where the locket Horcrux is hidden, and it's like Dumbledore's swan song chapter. what he's doing is he is essentially reading the room. He's reading the cave with wordless magic, and he's talking about like magic leaves traces and da 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 da. And essentially he's not. I don't even think he's using a wand for it necessarily in that scene, but he's basically figuring out like taking like signals and whatever and figuring out what they need to do. And I think that it's that same magic. And what I theorized was that because Harry and Dumbledore were coming there many, many years after that cave was created as a Horcrux hiding place, and many, many years after, you know, Tom Riddle took the children there, and many, many years after Regulus had gone there again with Creature, like so many years had passed between Harry and Dumbledore going there now that the image, like the scene wasn't clear. It had all sort of like faded and become very muddy and not really like visual, but just there were just like traces of those things that Dumbledore was able to pick up on using the same kind of magic. But it had been so long, it wasn't like a clear scene to watch like it was for Newt when he was using it in Crimes of Grindelwald. It was literally the very next day of something that took place the night before. So it was more vivid and it was more visual, and he was able to see a much clearer vision of what it was. So that was my theory, that those two things went together, and that is actually how Dumbledore knew what happened at the Potters. He was there immediately after the murders had taken place, and after he was like alerted magically somehow of the Fidelius charm being broken, and I believe so. Like, doesn't that? I'm pretty sure it's canon that the Fidelius charm broke when the killing curse rebounded and it kind of like blew out the side of the house. It was no longer a secret anymore. It just kind of like, I think that's how it worked, because the Fidelius charm wasn't necessarily broken when Voldemort was there because he had the secret. The Fidelius charm doesn't break when the secret is shared. But anyways, so I think that's the theory. The explosion broke the Fidelius charm, and Dumbledore was alerted. He apparated there right away, saw that the Potters were dead, saw that Harry was there, you know, by himself in the crib, probably screaming because he's a 1-year-old, and he used this ESPN instant replay magic to see what had happened. And it was that moment he realized that Lily had activated that ancient magic of her blood over for Harry with that sacrifice. And it was in that moment he realized, I need to make sure that this magic elongates, if you will, and lasts for this child. And so that's when he started to put the wheels in motion for where we pick up in chapter 1 of this entire series. He calls Hagrid, has Hagrid come get Harry. He takes the takes the information that he needs or whatever, and he goes to start prepping the charms for the for Privet Drive for the Dursleys. He's gone before Sirius Black shows up, so they never actually crossed paths. And so there's no, so he has that unfortunate, like, quote unquote plausible deniability of like not knowing that Sirius wasn't the secret keeper and not being privy to that until Prisoner of Azkaban. He's already gone when Sirius shows up, because at that point Hagrid is taking baby Harry out of the home. They kind of like meet outside, and Hagrid gets the motorbike. Dumbledore's off setting protections over Privet Drive. Hagrid is, he's got baby Harry. He's going to take care of him until Dumbledore gives him whatever the signal to bring him, because the charms aren't placed and ready yet. Just keep the kid safe. And Sirius is off to try to find Pettigrew and murder him, and things go really, really wrong for Sirius. But that was my theory on how Dumbledore knew to activate that blood magic, and how it kind of like ties all that together through Crimes of Grindelwald in an interesting way. We've got like future premonition via hookah smoke that from an object that Dumbledore created, and we've got past uh, past events visible through this instant replay magic that Dumbledore, I believe, taught Newt how to do. That Newt does in Crimes of Grindelwald, and that's how Dumbledore knew to activate that ancient blood protective magic from Lily sacrificing herself for Harry. So yeah, those are just a couple of theories I had. That's how they kind of shake out how I still and honestly I still kind of hold them, until, and I welcome you to try until somebody can give me better explanations, or has any interest in discussing the topic with me further. That's my headcanon, and I'm sticking to it. So thanks for hanging out for this topic of the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. Check out those other videos that I've been posting. They're really fun to make, and I hope that you're enjoying them. I truly kind of hope they like take off kind of into their own little content space here, because I think they are pretty unique in the Harry Potter creative community. There's lots of people that are doing this right now, talking into a microphone with a podcast about Harry Potter. I don't think anybody's doing those videos quite like that, and I hope that you enjoy it, and it's worth your time. If you are listening on the podcast apps, thank you. Make sure you follow, and go ahead and leave a rating and review for the podcast. Say something nice so that more people can find it. Yeah, that's what I got. So social media, all that stuff, belatedbinge.com is the website if you want to find all of those things. And yeah, until next time. I can't remember how I'm supposed to sign off of these because I didn't script out like notes or anything for this episode. So I'm just going to say thanks for being awesome.